in Thailand, in the northeast. And then we start to work in the northeast in a small village. The area would be, at the time that we start in 6 years back, it's about 4 to 5 square kilometers. And then when we look at the rainfall is quite good, and then the monthly rainfall, and we start to realize that we have some minor problem in July and August, that sometime, how can I say in English, that there is no rain during the rainy season for about a month. And also, the people in this area, when there is no rain, they could not stay in their village. They have to go to the city, to the town, look for the job. And we start to have more and more problem. And at the same time, the evaporation in the northeast is getting higher and higher. And then with the small watershed, we could do water balance and start to work with the local people to understand more about the water balance for like a monthly water balance.
Could you round off, please? Yeah.
And then we start to do development. And you see that before we start to do and after we start to do. And right now, their income is triple. And they don't have severe flood and drought anymore. This is all.
Thank you. ขอบคุณมากครับ Dr. Royal Chitradon, I'm sorry to have cut you off a bit there, but I'm just seeing what the time is up there. And of course, this area that Kun Chitradon was talking about is, of course, the big agricultural area of Thailand. The next speaker, final speaker, but certainly a case of last but not least, is Darren Swanson. He's Director of Measurement and Assessment at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, the IISD in Canada. And he has Swedish heritage, by the way, which of course commends him greatly to this session today. Darren is a professional engineer and strategic management consultant with 19 years of experience in the public and private sectors. He assists governments and corporations around the world with integrating the principles of sustainability, accountability, and adaptability, there I got it, into planning, budgeting, and policy making. His core areas of expertise include sustainability strategies, scenario planning, and strategic foresight. That's an interesting one, Darren. Indicator information systems, integrated assessment methods, and adaptive policy making. He is the lead editor and author of IISD's recent book entitled Creating Adaptive Policies, a Guide for Policy Making in an Uncertain World. I will advertise it to you for him so he doesn't have to do the embarrassing thing of doing it himself. He's also the co-editor and co-author of the United Nations Environment Programme's training manual on integrated environmental assessment and reporting. Darren.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I was wondering if the Swedish background, if you was going to be of advantage, or if you're going to hold it against me that my grandfather immigrated from your country. But thanks for the advertising the book, which I happen to have a whole bag full back here for anyone who's interested in having a book.
I knew it.
Thank you very much. As a director of measurement and assessment, I would be remiss if I didn't collect some data and do some analysis. And I think just looking at the numbers, the last couple days, 500 people strong in this meeting is a indicator that this discourse is ripe for sharing of practices and approaches. But if you might indulge me to collect a bit more data. May I see a show of hands for persons that work with a Department of Planning or a Department of Finance at either the national, local, or community level? By default, Governor Salcida his hand is up, so you don't need to raise your hand. But okay. So I'm looking at the hands around the room and sort of accounting for a shyness factor. We're probably looking at a very small percentage, probably less than around 2%. Now, I think we're answering our question here if we're getting to the mainstreaming of adaptation, the importance of should adaptation strategies be pursued outside of regular planning and budgeting processes. And this is perhaps an indicator of our ability to sort of have an impact on mainstreaming adaptation. And this is no knock against the organizing of this meeting. As a person in a Sustainable Development Institute that works to integrate sustainable development into planning, I know full well the challenges of convening and dialoguing with planning departments and finance departments. So, but I would challenge that perhaps in 5 years' time as an indicator of success, that to have a 50%, 50-50 show of hands of government planners at the different levels and our practitioners is really important, something to keep track of. If not, if we don't perhaps mainstream by working closely with government planners at all levels, I think we'll run the risk of becoming a cottage industry, being very busy, researching and consulting, but not actually adapting. But there are ways to work very closely with the government planners and finance departments and leaders, and that is through more ways to understand risk. These departments are all exploring, in addition to natural resource departments, new tools like scenario planning, like strategic foresight, which is being used in some sectors. The banking sector using stress testing right now to really understand and be less vulnerable. And these are all tools to build better anticipation in our planning. And as a group of people focusing on a particular stress, we can start to work with departments with those tools and the use of looking at multiple stresses, because people on the ground don't experience stress in an isolated manner. Just have a discussion with any farmer and he will, if you try to just talk about weather, he will talk about a lot of different things, including commodity prices and diseases and things like that. So this is important, that we build our anticipatory muscles, and that helps us work with planning and finance departments. And just as a very final point, I think if we're kidding ourselves if we think we can anticipate our way toward adaptation. I think it's the unknown unknowns and the surprises are a reality now, given how interconnected our world is through communication, transportation, and just the scale of our impact. And I think our social capital at the ground level in the communities is be one of our greatest assets in dealing with the unanticipatable. And we see this in examples. If we're Hurricane Katrina in the United States, who were the people there on the ground helping people in the flood? It wasn't necessarily local government or state government or national government. It was Mormons. It was faith-based organizations, issue-based organizations that were able to self-organize because all infrastructure had been destroyed. And it's that type of social capital that I think we need to look at supporting through financing just for their existence. Place-based organization, watershed groups, these are all very important things that will help us deal with the unanticipated. And those are important pieces. We heard local governments mentioned a lot, and there's a lot of social capital on the ground to be leveraged and used, and that's all part of mainstreaming. And thank you very much. I'm not sure where I'm at.
Good. Thank you, Darren. I've got some good news and some bad news before we throw the debate open to the floor. The good news is that we have the opportunity of extending this session until 10:45 and take the tea, coffee break. It'll still be 30 minutes, I'm sure, from 10:45 to 11:15 instead, and start the next, the parallel session at 11:15 instead of 11 o'clock. That all depends on you, of course. And I would like to thank two people for that, and also take this opportunity to thank them as being two of the key organizers of this forum. So please join me in a thanks to Rupa Rakshit and Serena Fortuna, sitting down here from UNEP. Thank you. The bad news is I can't help it. I have to use my position up here. Water, yes, but preferably not in this form, the United Nations. No, I don't want to do any sort of finger wagging, but it would be rather good if the UN could set a good example and not give us water in these plastic bottles. This is the sort of thing that ends up in the oceans and ends up with all that rubbish around islands like the Samoa Islands, for example, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, it's your turn. Who would like to, I see a hand over there. I know that gentleman too, Raman.
Thank you, Stuart. I shouldn't complain because you don't even get the water.
Okay, well, there you go. This is how it is in life, isn't it? There are so many injustices. I forgot to ask, please introduce yourselves, name and your affiliation, please.
Yes, I'm coming to that. My name is Dr. Raman Lechamanan. I'm from the ASEAN Secretariat, the 10 governments of this region. Stuart, I think I'm looking at the heading, it says, why adaptation mainstreaming? And there's a double question mark. And of course, it would be suicidal for anybody to speak against it. But let me pose some question. I mean, we are here, we are talking adaptation, so of course you must mainstream adaptation, and I think the speakers have given many examples at different levels. But if you go to a different forum, mitigation, then the same question, why mitigation mainstreaming? Why biodiversity mainstreaming? Why disaster risk reduction mainstreaming? As a policymaker, I mean, both at the national and now at the regional level, this is the dilemma that we face. You know, we want to mainstream everything, so much so that you break it down into small pieces, it becomes meaningless. I leave it at that, the point I'm trying to make. The second point, Mr. Chairman, is I think you mentioned one very important point. I know you got a background from a world-renowned professional accounting firms and so on. You raised
like yourself?
You raised the issue of natural resource accounting. Somehow, I think, you know, in the 80s, I know the World Bank and so on had a big debate, a lot of research papers. Even those days when environment is not high on the agenda. But now we find that that is somehow just been mentioned. And to me, I think that's a very important tool, because if you look at a private sector budget or financial statement, even a government statement, you know, they have a 1 or 2 page financial statement with all the figures there. And there are pages about CSRs and so on. Unless you translate all that into monetary terms, it doesn't make sense. And I think we always say that, you know, the economic people, the finance people and so on don't talk about environment. But we are environmentalists, but we don't talk about such things, you know, in a very constructive manner. So I think we're also guilty about, you know, we are comfortable talking about all these technical things and so on. But I think unless we push for these kind of things, you know, it is not going to happen. Thank you.
Would you like any particular individual here to respond, Raman? Or?
No, it's a general observation, because I think I'm sure the other may want to say something. It's up to the panel members. Thank you.
Charles?
Do you want to do it one at a time, or do you want to take a group of questions? Or
I think in this particular case we do this one at a time, but otherwise I think we'll take several questions.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Just to build on that very quickly, I'd said earlier that the rationale for why to mainstream has to be broken down in terms of what dialogue we're talking about, right? Are we talking about mainstreaming and development cooperation? The same thing holds true, and I think that this was something really important to pick up. Not only the rationale or the pros for mainstreaming depends on what we're talking about, but something that doesn't get nearly enough attention is the risks of mainstreaming. Yeah, and I think that it was really helpful to raise that issue here, because there are risks of mainstreaming. And again, those pertain to what we're talking about. There are certain risks associated with mainstreaming adaptation finance, right, for example. But in terms of mainstreaming across sectors, et cetera, there are other risks there. I know that within 2 organizations that I've worked with, CARE and the UN, internally, what happens is when we start talking about mainstreaming, a lot of people groan and they go, oh God, mainstreaming. We know what happens with mainstreaming. It's what we do with really important issues that are so big that we're not quite sure what to do with them. And so we say it's everybody's responsibility, and when it's everybody's responsibility, ultimately it becomes nobody's responsibility. We look back on it 5 years later and we say, how have we done on mainstreaming? And the answer is pretty much always the same, not quite as much as we would like. So I think that as we go forward discussing the opportunities and the importance of mainstreaming, it's incumbent upon all of us to give due attention to the risks associated with mainstreaming as well.
Thank you very much, Charles. See a gentleman there putting his hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a...
Do please tell us your name and affiliation.
I'm Professor...
And also if your question is aimed at a particular individual or individuals here as well, please.
Okay. I'm Professor Murali Krishna from India, from the Technological University in India.